And we're joined right now to talk about the contaminated blood scandal by former Conservative Health Secretary Stephen Dorrell. Good morning to you, Stephen. Good morning, Julia. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we were asking our audience today, people are awaiting the report. It's out at 12:30. Apparently, it's absolutely huge. It took many years, and it's many decades in the making, really, in terms of this scandal and the cover-up over the scandal, and then the battle for this inquiry and likely compensation as well. 30,000 people infected with HIV and hepatitis C after being given contaminated blood products. 3,000 have died. People are still being diagnosed, even now, with hepatitis C as a result of contaminated blood products. Just didn't know. The question I'm asking is, who do you blame for this scandal and why? You were Health Secretary, what, 95 to 97 under John Major. Were you aware of this at the time, and who do you blame?
Well, the answer, was I aware of it? Yes, I was definitely aware of it, because we did actually quite a lot of work during my time as Health Secretary, and I regard it as a failure, frankly, because we asked a series of questions about how this came to be, and we were told repeatedly that these patients received the best care available at the time, and that clearly turns out to have been a flat lie.
Told by who?
Well, by the people to whom those questions were addressed.
What, civil servants, NHS, bureaucrats, or what, NHS doctors, who?
Yes, and the answer is all of the above.
Right.
I, as Health Secretary, asked John Horan, who was my junior health minister at the time, to engage in a serious piece of work to find out whether there was fault, because the question, there are two separate questions here.
Yeah.
Was somebody at fault in delivering this care to those patients? To which the answer now is very clear, yes. At the time, we were told that that no one was at fault, that they were doing the best they could, because the second question is whether compensation should be paid. The view we took, and the view governments have consistently taken, is that in the absence of fault, then compensation shouldn't be payable. But if there was fault, and there was clearly been demonstrated to be fault, then of course compensation should be paid, and it shouldn't have taken 30 years to get to this.
I mean, and even in inquiry, again, that's been massively delayed by the way we do inquiries in this country, where if anyone is named or criticised, they get to look at it for months on end with their lawyers to give a draft report. This happens again and again. God knows how long the COVID inquiry is going to take. I mean, that will be 30 years before we get a decent response on that, and they're not even looking at and asking the right questions right now. But I mean, this is the frustrating thing, is that everyone said no, it's fine. Look, we had this with the post office scandal, and we know this didn't cause direct loss of life, but people took their lives, people's lives and livelihoods were ruined. But again, we see it in every single health scandal that we've had. Every time the NHS has a scandal, there is something happens, someone does something bad, or some silly mistake happens, and then it escalates. People speak up about it. They are punished and vilified and shut up and sacked and removed. People who work with the cover-up, they get promoted. There's more reason for the people who are senior to protect each other, because they've all done it together. It goes on for years, and then we have an inquiry, and then we're told lessons will be learned, it's all changed. But lessons never are learned, are they? This is a fundamental problem with a lot of our institutions. But when it comes to loss of life, it's a very, very deeply ingrained, I would say, sort of endemic to the structure of the NHS, it seems to me, that there are cover-ups and vilification of whistleblowers, rather than an attitude which is, something's gone wrong, right, we need to fix it, and we need to get to the bottom of it and deal with it and be open about it, which is what should happen in an organisation like that. Why does it go so wrong in the NHS?
Well, I think it's not, where I agree with you, it's not just the NHS, though it definitely is true of the NHS. There is a tendency in our country to take too readily the answer, we did our best. Doing our best isn't always good enough, and we need to be more open to understanding what is the evidence in retrospect that demonstrates that we should have done things differently. There's another angle on this, Julia, that I think I haven't seen covered in the press so far, at least, which is that we're very late at this party.
Yes.
Other countries have got there a lot quicker than we have. And that, I think, does reflect a tendency in this country to think that every problem needs to be solved entirely within our own institutions, rather than being open to look at the evidence of what's happening elsewhere and challenge ourselves to say, if it's happening there, Is it happening here too?
Yeah.
And should we do something about it?
And other countries not only concluded inquiries, but they've also had criminal prosecutions as a result. Now, Andy Burnham, another former Health Secretary at Labour, now, of course, Mayor of Greater Manchester, he expects some things that there should be criminal charges pressed against certain people. Because, look, again, the "we did our best" line doesn't really fly, because we know, look, there was a, pharmaceutical company makes Factor A, a blood product, which basically they're paying prisoners and drug addicts money to give blood. Oh, what a surprise! Those people might be a risk. Their advice from the 1950s: you have to heat blood products to actually kill off hepatitis C. They didn't do that. That wasn't done until I think many years later. Even though that was known. Don't mix more than 20 batches of blood together because of the risk of one infection. They were mixing tens of thousands of people's blood in one go because it saved money. They did loads of things that it was already known medically they shouldn't do. And once that people were infected, there was a cover-up in the pharmaceutical industry, there was a cover-up by the NHS, a cover-up by the health service and the government. It goes on. I mean, it's the same as COVID. They're like, oh, well, we didn't know now. We didn't know then what we know now. Yeah, you did. We've got proof that you did. How do we deal with that? Are we uniquely bad at that?
Well, unique is a strong word, but we're very slow by international standards. There was a French Prime Minister, you will remember, who was at risk of criminal prosecution for this, associated with this issue. Must be 20 years ago now. Yeah. And so this is we're very slow. We take too readily the answer, we did our best. Yeah. And there is a culture of secrecy in Whitehall, not just in the NHS, but much more generally. And it's the old cliche, frankly, that sunlight is the best disinfectant. We need to be a much more open discussion about this type of subject, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths rather than think that the NHS is in general a good organisation. I believe it is a good organisation, and therefore what the NHS does must be right. That's a false conclusion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your candid answers. Former Conservative Health Secretary Stephen Dorrell, thank you for that. 10:44 is the time. Just a quick word from Sam Armstrong, because it seems to me, and I've mentioned this before when it comes to scandals and things, which is actually when you look at the airline industry or air traffic control, they have a policy where you speak out. You don't have to be a whistleblower. It's the norm. If something goes wrong, like this happened, or you speak up and you say, look, this guy. I think he's a bit tired. I'm not sure he should be doing air traffic control. Tens of thousands of lives are at risk if something goes wrong. We need to have that sort of attitude within the NHS, within every structure, that speaking out makes you a good person, not a troublemaker, rather than, covering up. Look, we've seen again and again in the NHS, if you cover stuff up, you get promoted. We know that.
Yeah, and you really...
And in civil service.
Yeah, and you really need it because, as Stephen Dorrell just said there, he was in charge of this organisation. He tasked somebody who went out and asked what happened here. And he got back a report from somebody probably 5 or 6 steps in a chain below him back that said, it's all fine. Now,
nothing to see here.
Now, probably at the bottom it started with, there was a thing about this and this and this. And by the time it had come all the way back up to the top, the Chinese whispers in big organisations like the Post Office, like the NHS, it always comes back with the Panglossian, everything was fine here thing. And if you don't have that culture that counteracts it, disaster, literal disaster happens, and it happens all too frequently.
Yeah, again, my thing is when it keeps happening that many times, maybe it's a systemic problem. I hate that word, but it's ingrained in the culture, isn't it?